hello, look at that. So punctual. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the .NET in the Wild show with my guest, Matt Stratton from Pulumi. And as many of you already know, it's your birthday.
It is. Which is, I've been talking to a lot of my friends. They're like, what are you doing for your birthday? And I'm like, I'm going on Layla's stream. And they're like, that sounds like work. I'm like, it's not going to be work.
So. But look. I've done you cake. Loads of cake.
Oh, I love it. I have so much to learn about streaming from you, Layla.
Everyone's going to be doing that, and it's saying every time we drop cake it says happy birthday to you as well in the
that's
chat.
Perfect. Yes.
So I'm very excited. I thought I want to do something because it's so nice when people do stuff. I did a stream on my birthday this year, and it was like, you're like, do I want to do that on my birthday? And you're like, what else am I gonna do? And you get like beyond like 23, birthdays all munge into one, in my opinion anyway, in my experience. So I'm like, yay, I can at least do something nice for you.
Well, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. This has been a fun birthday so far. I didn't get my shout out when I did my Peloton ride, but that's okay. There were like 1,600 people on the ride, so they probably had a lot to get through. But
Oh my god, I've never done the Peloton stuff. So do they give you a birthday shout out?
I guess so. Like, I don't usually. I've been doing it on and off for a while, and more off than on in the last year. But I usually do like the pre-recorded rides because it's a little easier for me rather than doing them when they do them live. But when it's like a milestone ride, like your 100th ride or your 1,000th ride or any of these big numbers, or your birthday, the instructor, if it's live, will be like, oh, let me give a shout out to whatever. So today I woke up, I was like, I am going to do a live ride, and this was the one that was available, and they never got, and I think I'm just too far down on the leader, because I'm not that good at it anymore. So I was like, they never got to me, but it still was fun to do. And it was from the Peloton studios in London, so it was like on brand for my day.
Fantastic. Yay. So we've got lots of people saying how awesome your hair is. I've already said this, that you match my show, that you match Twitch, that you match .NET. You were just like the perfect guest.
I also colored my hair this color right when I joined Pulumi, not putting two and two together that purple is also a Pulumi brand color.
Isn't it?
So I did not color my hair for Pulumi brand. That's just a coincidence. But yeah, everything's it's a very on-brand day.
I know, it's just fantastic. Sadly, Whitney, I am over 23, only just. When I dyed my hair purple earlier on in the year, Matty, I really liked it, and until it faded and turned green. Yeah, that was my trauma, and it's also why Layla is no longer blonde. Because green, trying to rid myself of the greenness, then kind of rid me of my hair.
You just got to go back to just go.
Yeah. So we've got lots of people came over from my channel here, coming over to see you, and I've been asking people to bring us their DevOps stories, good and bad and horrific, hopefully. And so we've hopefully got some stuff. I'll tell you my stories as we go along, and I'm hoping that you're going to help me understand the culture of DevOps and some of the history and all of that as we go. Flagarita, yes, I actually it's saying red toner helps keep the green away. I actually put peach toner on mine, but it wasn't enough to make it work, to get rid of it all. So I get mine professionally done every few months, and then in between, like every week or two, I have to do overtone because it fades, just like you said. So this was I did overtone like 2 or 3 days ago, or maybe it was I don't know, I don't even remember when it was relatively recent, but it'll fade to pink in about a week and a half. But next week, I'm actually going for my color, and I might change it. I haven't decided. I might change to a whole different color, but, we'll just, time will tell. Oh, I'm excited then to see. And I'm coming on your stream. Is it this Thursday, isn't it?
It's Thursday, yeah. Yes.
So exciting.
I always give time zones in U.S. Central because I live in Chicago, so it's 2, and also it's my birthday, so everyone will accommodate me today. So it'll be at 2 p.m. So at 1400 Chicago time, so U.S. Central at twitch.tv/Palumi. We're gonna be kind of flipping the script here a little bit and doing some .NET with Palumi. We'll code the cloud, and we'll talk about what that means.
I'm very excited. I'm just giving you a shout out now. So that will be 8 p.m. folks, GMT, 9 p.m. for our Central European folks. Nerd Herder, welcome to the chat. Chicago for the win. Right. What else have we got? We've got Flagarita says, this is why I shave my head. TMK says, natural black are thicker than blonde hair, but that has something to do with how much protein is their hair. My hair gets grey or white when not in that, when we get old. We're not talking about greys, or as my hairdresser calls them, wisdom highlights, which I'm quite going for. Wisdom highlights.
I had to speaking of grey, my sister sent me when she posted her happy birthday to me, it was a picture of us at her wedding a few years ago, and she said it's been so long since we've seen each other that on all of our pictures both of us have brown hair instead of the current purple and gray. And so because even though she lives relatively close to me, but with COVID and stuff, but we got to fix that. She lives in Milwaukee, which for those of you who don't know is all of an hour and a half away from my house.
Is it north, isn't it?
North
yeah,
in Wisconsin, yeah,
that's it. I thought so. I was, my new hobby for 2021 is browsing Zillow, which is if you're in the UK, that's the equivalent of Rightmove. I don't know what it is in Europe. It's like a property listing site. It's quite addictive. Don't get hooked on Zillow. I think someone sent me a Saturday Night Live sketch of Zillow as well, so you should go and find that. I think that's me, and I found this gorgeous house in north of Chicago, not far from the border. That's kind of why I knew where it was. And I was like, oh my god, this is divine. 45 minutes to central Chicago. And then I remembered after watching what's that? The Good Fight and The Good Wife, and how cold Chicago looks. I was like, no, I'm not very good with it. Is your Alexa talking to you now?
No, I was just pulling up my weather app because I was going to tell you how cold it is. It is in Fahrenheit right now. The feels like temperature is 12 right now here. It's a special. It's been cold the last day or two. My dog, when I let her out, and this is her first winter, and I kind of opened the door to let her out, she sort of takes the step out and looks back at me like, are you kidding me?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I just did that, folks, for all of you Celsius folks like me. -11. That's freaking cold.
It'll get cold. It'll get colder throughout the winter, but this is for me for my birthday to be this cold. It's not usually this cold, so I'm aware of it.
I've never been to Chicago. I'd like to go because there's lots of people who are saying, Layla, come to Chicago, come speak in the local meetups and stuff, and I'd like to go. And I've got an old university friend who moved out from London there, but it has to be in the summer when it's not bleh.
Well, how about May?
Is May nice? Ooh.
May is very nice. May and September are the two nicest months in Chicago. And I just put a link in the chat, our CFP for Devops Days Chicago, which is May 11th, maybe. I don't know. I should know. It's my event. Whatever, sometime in May. But our CFP is open until the end of next month. So you should mark your calendars. Hopefully everything will be in a place that we can do our in-person event. But,
And yes, the food. You have, is it the deep dish pizza? It's like pie.
So, yeah, you're going in an interesting place. This is something, there's a few people on Twitter like to give me a hard time about this. So a fun fact, so you're describing deep dish pizza, which most people would associate as Chicago style pizza. Most people who live in Chicago don't actually like deep dish. I mean, we like it fine, but it's not our go-to, right?
Okay.
There's a style called, that's tavern style, which is like a type of thin crust cut into squares because it's like you would get it in a bar. So it's a little square that could fit on your napkin. And tavern style is substantially more popular in Chicago than deep dish. Sort of our joke is that the only people who eat deep dish pizza are the tourists. Or the only time I eat deep dish is when someone comes to visit. But yes, Italian beef, that's the other one. So
what did you do last week?
So me and Sasha a couple weeks ago, so my friend Sasha, so Divine Ops on Twitter, she was asking me because I love Italian beef sandwiches, one of my favorite things, and she's like, I have all these I want to try. She's like, I've had it and I didn't really like it, maybe I had it the wrong way, and we did like a little beef crawl. We went out and we ended up only going to 3 places, and then the 4th place we missed and we went for ice cream instead. But we went to some of the more popular Italian beef places and tried it and rated it, and my kids came along. I dragged my kids along and they gave their things, and my one son doesn't like Italian beef, so he tried the fries. And so if you look at the hashtag Beefops, you'll probably find our beef crawl.
Okay. And what is an Italian beef
So
sandwich?
Some people would say it's similar to, it's a sandwich.
Okay.
It's a kind of cousin of like a Philly cheesesteak, but only in that it's a sandwich of beef, right?
Okay.
So it's kind of a roast beef that's roasted. It's in its own juice.
Yeah.
And then sliced thin. It's put on a big, like almost like a hoagie roll. Very similar to like a French dip will make you feel like that. And then it's either served with like sweet peppers on top or like a hot giardiniera. And the real trick is you order it dipped, which means they put the beef on the roll, and then they take the whole thing and they dunk the whole sandwich inside the vat of the juice of the gravy, so it gets all nice and saturated.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And if you really want to do bad things to your cholesterol, you get what's called a combo, which they put in an Italian sausage, and then they cover it with the Italian beef, and then you dunk the whole thing and put giardiniera on it. And I could eat those about once every 2 years because it's just too much, but it's amazing.
It sounds like messy. Do you eat this with a knife and fork? Do you eat it with your hands?
But you have to do the lean. So the trick is you sort of put your elbows on the table and you got to stand with your feet like about a foot behind the counter so you can lean over. It doesn't get all over you. But this is. I've still been working on trying to figure out like a talk to give that uses Italian beef as a metaphor for DevOps, but I haven't gotten there yet. But watch my speaking site this year. Maybe I'll get it. Maybe I'll find it in 2022.
It seems that Nerd Herder says now there is a special stance here, and poor Napalm is drooling with this. I mean, this is it. I quite like talking about food, and just seeing all the cakes that falls. Maybe I should have got like Italian beef sandwiches to fall from the sky instead of birthday cakes. But
birthday cake is great too.
Yeah.
Well, everybody try to, if it's safe to do so, Devops Days Chicago, we do it upright, and we always have our food vendors, our food catering is always, they do local Chicago stuff too, like good places. So we do our food good at our conference. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay. I am tempted.
So check it out. Yeah.
I'll have to figure something out because I bringing us back on track here, DevOps.
Right.
I mean, I love going off on tangents. Most people who know me on streams know that I never stay on topic. I am a little wayward wanderer. Food ops, yes, that's very good. I'm not very good with DevOps. I struggle to describe it. I struggle to know, should I know more? Do I know enough? Do I know anything? And it's all this like, oh, DevOps isn't a thing, and I'm scared to use the word DevOps. Like, oh, there is no one that does DevOps, and I'm like, I don't know.
So it's not just you. Like, okay. I've been part of the DevOps movement it's funny that I think every year I've been part of it for a larger percentage. So I still in my head always think of myself as late to the movement, but I'm like, no, it's really been like 80% of the time now. So I need to not say that anymore. But yeah, it's a hard one to define. It's gotten sort of re-understood in different ways over time. So that's totally understandable. And there are a couple things. So like, I'll kind of explain like what it means to me, how I think about it, which is one way. But one thing I will say, you sort of touched on this when people are like, oh, you don't do it, it's an idea. And I used to be a big proponent of the statement of saying DevOps is not a tool, title, or team. So I'd be like, there's no such thing as a DevOps engineer, blah, blah, blah. And I've changed my mind on that. And I just want to sort of set this tone. And here's why. There's two reasons. One is, and it was Ian Coldwater who made this really clear to me, and I really like how they put this. They said, when we're out there being really loud on the stage and on social and being like, DevOps engineer is a bad title. The problem is everybody who has that title, nobody gave that title to themselves. So all that happens is you're making people feel bad who didn't even make that choice in the first place. And the people who came up with that, whether we're right or wrong about that, all it's doing is a form of gatekeeping. It's making people feel cruddy about something that wasn't up to them. The other part of that is that generally having the title DevOps engineer versus sysadmin or ops engineer or whatever is usually about a 20 to 30% bump in pay. So like, go get paid. I'm like all for it. Yep, call yourself whatever you want to get that bag. So I'm cool with that. Now that said, I also look at things like when I see, and I'm getting ahead a little bit, but when I see like a DevOps team, when someone's like, we have a DevOps team, to me it's not inherently a problem, but it's almost like, I call it an organizational smell, like a code smell, right?
Okay.
Like when you see something and you're like, this isn't necessarily wrong, but it makes my spidey sense go off a little bit and my ears perk up and it makes me want to ask more questions. And I usually do that because a lot of times a DevOps team can mean they're just an just an automation team. That's downplaying, but they are writing automation. They're not, it's just the team that's trying to do automation for the whole organization. That's tough.
Yeah.
Because for other reasons. But if we sort of take a step back about what DevOps is, it is not just a cult. So it's funny how after however many years of talking about DevOps and where this came from, in 2010, Damon Edwards and John Willis came up with this acronym that we still use today. It's like we keep trying to redefine DevOps year over year over year, and we always come back to CAMS or CALMS. And it's about culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. And all of those are just as important as the other one. The only reason we use them in that order is it spells a word, but if you want to call it clams, you can, or small. That's totally fine. And it's all and the reason it sometimes feels like we over-rotate on culture when we talk about DevOps is because we need to talk about it a lot. Nobody needs to tell engineers to play with automation. Like, we like tools. We're just going to do that. I don't have to tell you to do that. You're going to do that because you want to. The people-y stuff we have to double down on a little bit, but it can sometimes feel like we over-rotate on it because it's just tools influence culture, culture influences tools.
Yeah, I muted.
So, but I would say one of my favorite definitions of DevOps was a guy named John Vincent said this years ago, and he said DevOps means never saying that's not my job, and DevOps means giving a bleep about it, right? And it doesn't mean everyone does everything. This is a kind of a thing. There was a movement for a while called no-ops, which is sometimes what people think, which is like, we're just going to make our developers do everything. And the thing is, in the world that we live in, there's room for domain expertise.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't expect, it doesn't mean give developers root and prod and just say, go have fun. Now you're completely responsible. And like everything else, all of this falls apart because of nuance, right? Like, we want to be able to have a quick hot take in a word or in a phrase or whatever, but there's nuance to it. Same thing is true with DevSecOps or shift left. When you talk about shift left, there's nuance to it.
What is shift left?
Okay, so here's sort of the thing. And so if you think about like a value stream, right, or whatever, or the process of getting something from an idea to getting it in front of users or whatever. And if you say there's like a pipeline of it, doesn't have to be a CD pipeline, but just there's a stream, right? It goes from point to point to point. We start writing some code, and we do this, and we do this thing, we do this thing. And normally when we draw these things, we start at the left and we move towards the right. That's why we say that. That's why shift left comes into that. So what we're thinking about with shift left is saying, what are some things that we normally don't even think about till we get far to the right? Let's move those things a little more to the left. So if you think about it, where is the easiest and cheapest place to fix a bug is when?
in development.
When you introduce it.
Yeah.
When you introduce it, right? Like the quicker that you make a bug, the quicker that you find it, it's much easier to fix it. So the same thing is true with like security, right? Like I've said before, like security is just another aspect of quality. So if we think back to if we were to say we're not going to do any quality testing until the very end, right before release, right? That would sound bonkers. You'd be like, what's up with you, man? No, of course, we're testing constantly. But we do that with security, right? Like how often do we have things where we have this idea of a hardening sprint, right? Like we're going to work on this thing for several sprints, and then at the very end, now we're going to finally security test it. And of course, if we find a security problem, are we going to stop our release? Of course not, because now it's the 11th hour and we've already committed to it and it's already going to happen. So we're going to go get an exception from our security folks, that say, okay, it's okay. Well, that's all theater because the bad guys on the internet don't care that you have a note, right?
Yeah, they're already in there getting it done,
right? So what we're trying to do is we're saying, but the problem with the mentality of shift left is people hear it to say, move that work to the people that are earlier in the process, right? So if you think about your software developer is usually the most in the pipeline in the right? Because you're sitting and you're writing the code. So shift left doesn't mean make those people security experts. It means take that work and let's bring our domain experts earlier into it, right? So that's but again, look at how I had to explain that nuance. But then you hear shift left, a lot of times people hear, oh, then developers are 100% responsible for security and we don't need security people, make developers security people. We tried that with ops, didn't work for good reason. That's why the no ops movement doesn't exist anymore, right? Like people need to understand and feel how they can work together on those places.
Yeah, and when I was in engineering, I actually had zero to do with deployment. Well, that's not true. I think I've mentioned this to you before, and I've certainly mentioned it on my stream, is that in my second ever engineering job, I didn't stay very long because the whole thing was like we dragged and dropped the changes. We even had Git, but we dragged and dropped the changes onto the server in like the file tree. And when I said, well, what build are we on? What do you mean, what build are we on? Like, how do we roll back? We didn't know if what was in source control matched what was live. We had nothing, and that was only my second job, whereas my first one, we actually had a full pipeline. I would deploy to our testing server, and I'd go and look at that, and if I was happy, I could push a button that would push it forward it onto the live server, which was great. But that second job, I stayed 4 months because I was like, this isn't right. And they, that I knew that was wrong. And then moving on to my next job, I didn't have anything really to do with it. We had the IT team. We wouldn't even give them the release. We would work on our stuff. The testing team would say, okay, your code complete now, stop. And then we'd have a bit of a jolly, think about, oh, what are we going to do now? And then testing, we had 6 testers, and they'd come back to us and go, here are all your regression bugs. And then after I'd fixed those, and this was why I left that company, 9 weeks to fix my regression bugs. Then we'd push that back, it would all be retested. And then eventually, like 3 months after code complete, that would be handed over to the IT team and they'd deal with it. And I didn't know when our stuff went live. Sometimes they'd stagger it in, they'd choose a few customers to upgrade and slowly go through. I'm seeing some horrified faces from like Jedi Mega Man here, and hello Aztec, how are you?
I was going to say, Layla, I didn't realize you worked at the same place as I worked at, like, 10 years ago. Because I will tell you about how we did it at apartments.com, and everyone's going to continue to be horrified. But our excuse was, the only excuse I would make is this was like 2010. This was 11 years ago. So we didn't know DevOps.
This was 2017 that I was doing this.
So. I got news for you. In Beyonce's year 2021, there's companies still doing this too. So you know.
Yeah, I hear about it often. I think I know I'm friends with people who still work at that company, and it's like nothing's changed. They haven't implemented any tests. I mean, we did not have a single test on our entire system. And that's why after that, I was like, I need to go somewhere where they actually write tests. And that's why I went on to do TDD. And I went somewhere where, oh my God, it was so far the other way. We had like my push to source control would fail if I didn't have enough test coverage. And then I'd have to go speak to the lead developer. I'm like, I added an automapper. It's a third party. Can you get an exception from the code coverage? And then they'd be like, I don't know, let me go and have a look. And it was so different. So, yeah.
That's a whole other rant about code coverage metrics, about like, great, you have 80% code coverage, but the 20% you don't have coverage on is your most important part of business logic. So good job. No, we used to do, when I was on I come from, just for some background too, I come from the ops side. So I was a sysadmin for 2 decades until I started working on the vendor side. And I was at Chef for a while, which is infrastructure as code company. I was at PagerDuty, and now I'm at Plumie. But I definitely have ops is where I come from. And so I ran tech ops for a .com, a .net based .com, no less. So this is super relevant, here in Chicago for a long time. And that was like when we had releases, what would happen is the developers would write up a Word document that was called a PMI, Production Migration Instruction. And it was a list of, here's the DLLs to copy, here's the QA server to, first, because we would do the releases to QA and then the release, so they're like, well, we're in this QA track, so go to the dev server, copy these DLLs, and then like the front end, I don't remember what we called them, because there were different people doing the like, here's all the templates that we touched, so copy those, here's the changes to make to the web.config, blah, blah, blah. And then the fun part was, those dev servers that we again, from it, this is why DevOps matters, because there's so much anger that comes from ops, like, and I'm sure the devs were really mad at us too, like, but we would build these carefully crafted dev servers, and they were just file servers. Nobody ran, the application never ran on the dev server. People just sort of did their thing, and they copied that up to the to the dev server, and that's where you got it from. And then you're like, this isn't even running in dev. And they're like, it was on the dev server, but the website didn't test it. And then same thing, then QA would go and test, and we go back and forth, and we would have these releases that were after hours. So they'd be, starting at like 6 o'clock, you get the pizza in. I remember I always had someone whose job was to run interference to our CTO just to keep her out of the way, because like when things would start going south as they would, it was just like, she wanted to help, and it was like, whose job is it to just go and talk to Pat? Right, because it was it was just sort of like nothing was, because everything would go nuts. And then things started to get better as I was leaving. We started to move into some more automation. So, but it was just like, and you talked about there was no versioning on anything, so the DLLs weren't even versioned. So you're just like, the way we knew what we had in there was the timestamp on the file. So things used to be terrible. Things are still terrible. Lots of places. Some places they're getting better. But a lot of times you'll see one of the core things when we think about DevOps is this idea of empathy, and it's really because the more you understand, because everybody wants to do good work. So like we all feel like, I was sort of telling the story from 11 years ago about how like dev was the enemy to me. Again, as humans, they were fine. Like we were buddies, we'd eat lunch together, but I was like, yeah, my job was to protect my infrastructure from the devs, and because they would do stuff and it would make it break, and I would get called on Saturday to deal with it. That's not healthy, right? And the thing is, you have to remember, like, everybody wants to do good work, but they have different incentives, they have different drives, they have different things, and the more we understand where someone that we're interacting with is coming from, we can actually help them do better work. Like, because oftentimes through this will happen as you start to build these bridges. We talk in DevOps, people talk about breaking down the silos or getting rid of silos. Silos can be good. Silos, like grain silos, provide a function. So I like to think about building bridges, right? You have your thing, that's great, you're a domain expert, but, and if I know what you need, I can actually probably help you do your job even better, but I need to know where you're coming from. And this is where it gets a lot into just like, so this is, and where it's a lot of ways, I think when I think about DevOps as a little bit of the amalgamation of Agile and ITIL. So like before we had Agile, we had this thing called ITIL, which was this sort of very regimented way to run IT operations and service desk and everything. And we built all these things together. Hi, Sharon. Yes, silo. Sharon says silo again. So we did this, and then, but like when it came to software development, like ITIL at the time, and I know ITIL's changed. I'm talking about when it was, it was sort of like, oh, I don't know, they just sort of do their thing. And then when the Agile movement happened, it was all about getting these cross-functional teams, and let's get the testers and the product people and developers. And then you're like, what about ops? And they're like, I don't know, don't they have ITIL? They sort of have their own thing, and so DevOps was like, okay, let's just make that tent a little bit bigger. Is kind of, I like this. ITIL is when the process needs more process. Yeah. That's we're all trying. That's the thing. And so like you were saying earlier in the pre-show about like, you're like, do I do this thing? Am I doing the DevOps or whatever? And the reality is like, we really are all doing the DevOps when we're working together and we're thinking about what we can learn from each other. I have a talk I've been giving called The Journey from DevOps to Cloud Engineering. And I've been thinking a lot about this practice of cloud engineering. And it's sort of taking DevOps back, because DevOps kind of got re-identified, right? All of us vendors, we kind of screwed it up, right? I will say, you can't buy DevOps, but I can sell it to you. And I got news for y'all. Y'all are getting DevOps sold to you. And it kind of became all about automation and Kubernetes and YAML and all this stuff. And again, it got all on the
Don't say that swear word. YAML is no, make it go away.
We're trying. You'll see. We're gonna do a deployment of some stuff on Thursday on my show, and there's not gonna be a single piece of YAML. It's all gonna be .NET code.
Oh my God, that is music to my ears.
Yes, so it'll be super fun.
No, look at these horrible people in chat. Look at this. YAML. Stop swearing. I think we should put that on a like moderated banned word because it's swearing. Oh my goodness, look at them. They're all getting in on it. That's going to be our word now.
You know how that is. It's like when I tell my kids, I'm like, don't do that. That's just an open season for like, they look
that
at
bothers
you.
What? Don't do this.
Yeah, I'm not touching you.
Yeah, that.
Yep.
And chat they're like naughty children. Look at them, they're literally all going off. PyroCat. I love YAML, it's so much nicer than XAML. And what's the other one? TOML?
You're not wrong in some ways. I mean, there's just, it's TOML is really where it's at, but that just didn't take off. Although I know, Layla, you're a Hugo fan, so you might.
So I've done TOML. Yeah. You see, you helped me with my Hugo stuff. People are always going, why are you doing Hugo, Layla? Aren't you a .NET developer? I'm like, choose the right tool for the job. And like, Hugo's pretty damn good.
Hugo is the absolutely, so this is just a fun Hugo thing. I have a Hugo deployment that is one of the weirdest ones that exists. Okay. And every time we have problems with it, pretty much the response is, why are you doing things the way you're doing them? But it's because nobody else has this very specific problem. So for Devops Days, just for those who don't know, so Devops Days is where the word DevOps kind of came from. Like Andrew Clay Schaefer and Patrick Dubois in 2009, they wanted to put a conference together, and the Agile System Administration was too long of a name for a conference, so they decided to call it Devops Days. And anyway, so there's DevOps Days happen all over the world, as I mentioned the Chicago one, but they're all very independent, right? So every local city, I am the chair globally, but I don't run them. So the website, though, is basically a big giant Git repo. So every event, when they want to put themselves up there, they have to, and we do it with Hugo. So what you have is this scenario where I have a website that has hundreds of contributors worldwide, where I have no expectation. I cannot require them to install anything on their machine short of Hugo and Git. Yeah. And they are contributors who touch the code maybe once a year. So there's a lot of janky stuff we do, and it's funny because people who know static site generator, people who know JavaScript, know all this stuff, they'll look at what I do with it and they'll go, well, why don't you just do a Go pipeline? I'm like, I can't. Nope. Because I don't know, I don't know what we can't let. And I will say, though, this is just my shout out to my other favorite new thing, which is Gitpod and code spaces. Like, that actually says Gitpod is solving this problem for me, where like I can just be like, cool, you can just fire it up. You don't have to have anything installed. So yeah, shout out to, look at this, we've got a bunch of DevOps
I know,
Days.
look at it all, everyone coming out.
I'm gonna give my shout out to Devops Days Kansas City is some of the best AV of any Devops Days I've been to, short of Devops Days Minneapolis, but that's because the core organizer's partner is an AV professional, so they always bring it up. Devops Tel Aviv, another great Devops Days I was at. Unfortunately, I don't know how calendars work, so I had to miss the actual fun day after the event where they do great things for their speakers. And I was like, oh, I'm leaving right after. And Sharon's like, what is wrong with you? Do you not know how calendars work? I'm like, I do not. So.
Well, I dropped the link to devopsdays.org,
yes,
folks, so you can go and check out all of the different site DevOps
There's
Days
a bunch that are
locations.
coming up. London is coming back. Birmingham, UK is having their first DevOps Days in May as well, right before Chicago. Here's a fun Hugo Go thing for you. I know we're not talking about Go, we're talking about .NET. You know how maps and Go aren't sorted? If you look at the Devops Days website right now, you'll see that the events are all in the wrong order.
We had a chat about this, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh, that's exactly what we talked about. So So here's it is. Yeah. So computers were a mistake. That's what it boils down to.
It's like, go and find your location. It doesn't need to be in date order. Just you want to go to Birmingham, go find that, and it will tell you the date. It doesn't. There's no date order here. You're not going to go to them all, are you? No. Who would go to all of these events?
Oh, it's been done. So this was a while ago. I think it was 2014. Jason Hand, who was at VictorOps at the time, went to every DevOps Days in North America. And that was, again, there have been many, many, many more. There weren't even as many, and it damn near killed him. So, yeah. Don't try to go to all of them, but maybe try to go to most of them. I don't know. Go to the one that's by you. It's going to be amazing.
Well, then that's Birmingham. And I could go and have a very good curry in Birmingham. But I'm kind of liking the idea of all this food we were talking about earlier in DevOps Days Chicago. I'm like, I
submitted to talk to DevOps Days Birmingham, so I'm still waiting to hear back. So you never know, and then maybe maybe you'll have to tell me where the good.
I'll come up, and it's like
Birmingham.
25 minutes on the train for me to go to Birmingham, so I'll come up and we'll go have curry. Some of the best curry houses there are in Birmingham. So. Yes, that sounds like a plan. I swear, half the time I plan my DevRel journeys around food.
That's how it's supposed to be done.
Okay, good. Because when I went to St. Louis for Strange Loop.
Mm-hmm.
And my team and I we had a planning thing because there were 6 of us going. We were going to do a team get together first. So we were going to be there for a whole week. And we're like, okay, this night we're going to eat this. On this night we have to go to this. We were looking up all the places, all these ones going. And it would literally, we're supposed to go to a conference that day. Yeah, but in the evening we need to go to this smokehouse and this place. And yeah, because we had quite a lot of foodies on our team. So it was great. And yeah, I got home and I was like, I just want to eat lettuce for about 3 weeks, please. Lettuce.
I have decided, like, for a while, I feel like my plans for like my DevRelling was figure out what conferences Jason Yee at Gremlin was going to be at, because he knows all the really good food places, and it was just like, just attach yourself to Jason and you will get good food.
Okay, I'll bear that in mind. I don't know, Jason, but I obviously need to now.
Yes. He's get bisect on Twitter. So
okay. I need to meet all these people who are fellow foodies, and tag along. I'm in it for the food. So I've missed the food these past 2 years of not traveling. I feel like, if I have to cook one more meal at home, I'm sure everyone is feeling very similar to me. One more food. Java Grant bananas. What? Oh, bananas and curry. Oh, people look at me like I'm crazy, but you have a good curry with sliced bananas on the side. Okay, this is turning. Maybe I should do a food stream, not a coding stream.
Yeah, I could give you all sorts of good recos of people. You could have. So like Paul Zarkowski at Red Hat is like
he used to be on my team, didn't he?
Okay, yeah. So Paul, you said there was always I don't know if it ever was a real blog, but it was like, will Paul eat this, or what's Paul eating now, or something. So Paul has a lot of great things. So Kat Cosgrove on my team at Bloomy is also a good person to connect to with food, and Sharon, who is in the chat. Also, I know has great food opinions and knows some great places. So like, yeah, we're. If you wanted to learn about DevOps, I'm sorry, we're just talking about
it's fine.
And Italian beef at this point.
It's okay. People are used to going off on all sorts of tangents when I'm around. I'm like the queen of the tangent. I swear, it's fine. So Aztec says I have a Pinterest of food porn I need to share. And Flagarita says upside of traveling again: exotic locations, great food, lovely people, good time. Downside of traveling: everything else associated with travel, trousers. Yeah, you need to have I think there's going to be the whole thing now with tracksuit bottoms. I mean, I can look so nice on the top, but then I've usually got my big pink tracksuit bottoms with the elasticated bottoms and the drawstring waist on. Nobody ever sees those. It's all good.
I will say the funny thing is, through all of quarantine, I still wore jeans almost every day. And occasionally, unless I was wearing gym shorts, but I don't and it's so weird, I don't like sweatpants or track pants. I mean, they're perfectly comfortable, but I put things in my pockets and then I feel like they're gonna
fall down.
I don't trust the drawstring. So so I've been wearing hard pants even since COVID, which is a
leg
really weird
cages
thing. I know. I can't believe that I've made this confession on
I'm in shock. It's I'm never good with jeans anyway. Having been a power lifter and a horse rider, jeans are never my friend. You were saying Flagarita.
I was saying Flagarita said that they're symbols of the oppressive patriarchy. I said it's really the oppressive patriarchy. But
I like it. This is it. Nerd Herder agrees with you. The risk of sweatpants and heavy objects in your pockets. Yeah, I have that. That's fine. That's fine.
Maybe I just need a fanny pack.
I have one. I usually have one when I travel. And my old team, not my new team. My old team were like, "Oh, what's with the bum bag, Layla?" I'm like, no one's gonna mug me at the airport when my passport is under my jumper. It's fine. So I think they need to come back. The 80s had something right with fanny pack / bum bags. So that is it. So you told me that you have done some C#. Is that right? You did some?
Well, I did C# from the ops side. So remember, when I was at apartments.com, we were .NET, one of the more well-known, larger .com .NETs at the time. And so I definitely a lot of that, but everything was in C#. So I had to do a little bit, it was more from a very nascent DevOps. We didn't call it DevOps then, but it still would be scenarios where, because again, you're getting called, I'm getting paid. Our developers weren't on call. We didn't do things that way. That's a whole other thing we can talk about sometime. I spent my time at PagerDuty, and here's the thing, everybody should be on call, but also you should get paid for being on call. So let's just get that straight, right?
Yeah, see, I wouldn't go to jobs where I was on call.
Some of the non-US countries are civilized about this, and you actually have to pay people for being on call. Here's the other thing, though. Everybody just made the same face Layla did when I said everybody be on call. Let me tell you something. If the beautiful thing about being on call, you get to go off call. Because I got news for you. If you're not part of an on-call rotation, you are always on call, my friend. They know how to find you. So that's a whole other thing. But anyway, that would be the thing, right? Me or my team, we would get paged or, on Saturday or dealing whatever, and we're trying to troubleshoot this. We're trying to figure out what's wrong. So, might have to go dig into the code and try, which again was always super fun because how are we going to do it? Because our version control was for shit, right? You know, it was, hey, shout out to Visual Source Safe, you know, and who knew what version it was, but definitely a lot of background on the operations side of .NET, of C#.NET, from the web perspective, and we tried a whole bunch of really nutty things in the beginning of the teens.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to dig into .NET with you and C# with you, like on Thursday, because so Pulumi, you can write your Pulumi programs in lots of different languages. That's the cool thing about it. And C# is the one, like, or it could be F#. It's any .NET. You can, you know, you can do some VB.NET. It's all that stuff. That's probably what I should be doing more of. I mean, because I was doing VB, like last time I wrote code like that was real was ASP, not ASP.NET, but like old school
classic ASP, yeah.
Visual Basic, yeah, that was. So anyway, but out of the languages, so like, you know, you can do TypeScript, JavaScript, so I know that reasonably well. You know, Go is the one that I probably know the best. Thankfully, there's other people on my team that are, you know, super good at Python, because I sort of can get myself through Python. But yeah, like the .NET stuff, like I need to get better at that. So I'm really excited for our stream, so kind of see how that goes. I need to do some more stuff with it. Yeah.
And what do you think some developers, trying to divvy us up here, developers in different languages, are some better at the whole deployment and DevOps side of it than others? Is there some sort of leaning towards, like, I don't know, Python developers are the best at DevOps, and like C# developers need to go back to school and get on with it? Do you think there's like is there some kind of cultural difference between each stack? Do you think? Have you noticed that?
Not as much today. I think like early on, one of the things just in general where I would have seen that this was harder to do in the early days of the DevOps movement and the automation stuff and modern config management, it was really hard to do this stuff on Windows, which would remove most of the .NET. And the interesting part about this is, I always find this fascinating. So Jeffrey Snover, who's a guy who invented PowerShell, and I don't even remember what he's doing at the big mucky muck at Microsoft now, super smart dude. He was on an episode of DevOps Cafe, like circa 2013.
Right.
And he made a really interesting point. And he's like, part of the thing is, if you think about like Linux operating systems, you think about Linux, think about Unix and everything is a file. It's a file system based operating system.
Yeah.
Windows, especially at the time, is an API first operating system. So like, so Linux lent itself really well to things like Puppet and Chef, because all you were doing was if you wanted to change how you deployed, you know, MySQL or Apache or whatever, it was just a bunch of files. Everything was a file. Every single handle is a part of the file system. Windows, you have to go through an API, and a lot of those APIs, until actually Jeffrey led this with his Monad manifesto. Before, if you think about pre-Monad manifesto, a lot of those APIs were private. Like Microsoft could use those APIs, but you couldn't do that. So like you couldn't. And so the stuff that started to happen with you know, PowerShell DSC, and if you think about, again, for those who aren't as long in the tooth as I am, that weren't, you know, having to admin Microsoft back office systems in the early 2000s and stuff, the fact that like I could go through the SQL Server installation configuration wizard, and at the end it would spit out PowerShell to do everything I just did, that was like blow my mind. Because the way and I know, because I tried to automate Windows servers, and we would go and we would have to like, yeah, you could write, you know, we'd write some VB scripts that could do some of the stuff, but then you'd have to go and clicky, or you would try to use something like SMS or configuration manager, which is really never meant to, or you're doing stuff with GPU, like you're always trying to find the way, and it wasn't there.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of deployment things that Microsoft kind of put into Visual Studio in the early days that just they weren't well connected to the rest of the stuff you might have to do with the infrastructure. So it was really hard. So versus it was a lot easier for more adoption on the non-Microsoft operating systems in the early days of Chef. And I mean, like I knew like Chef was not supported on Windows at all. Nordstrom was doing it. I was doing it. And it was more like, wow, everyone was just surprised it worked at all. They're like, oh shit, I don't even know how you got that to work, right? Now what's interesting to me is that now, as we move from less at the operating system level, everything is moving more towards being API, because if we're talking about cloud resources, it's all API driven. So like we've gone from it just being about the file system in the way we think about configuration, that we're talking to things like ARM or CDK or Cloud Control. All the APIs from these cloud resources is how we're doing configuration. Fun fact, one of the reasons IIS was one of the first things you were able to actually use for something like Chef or Puppet is because it is so file system based.
Okay.
Right? Most of your configuration for IIS was not like in the registry or whatever. It was actually XML files. It was all files, so we could do automation for it. And everybody always wanted me to write Chef cookbooks for BizTalk or SharePoint, and because I was like the Windows guy at Chef for a while, and it was just like, oh God, no, please. I have had to expunge every reference to SharePoint from my LinkedIn ever, because I still get people asking me if I'm interested in a contract to hire job in Virginia to be a SharePoint administrator, and I'm like, please no.
And is this Chef that's now part of Progress?
Yeah. So
yeah.
They were, yeah. So that's the Chef stuff. So if we sort of think through the evolution, little history level of like what we would call modern configuration management, it really started with Mark Burgess with CF Engine. And then it's funny how like almost every modern configuration management tool comes about because the person who invented it was a little annoyed with the one that was already there. So like Luke Knies created Puppet, not that annoyed, but there were things that CF Engine didn't do. Like he was using CF Engine and was like, this is, by the way, everyone who's listening, I'm going to get some of this not exactly right, but you'll get more.
It's fine. It's a rough idea.
But Luke was kind of like, okay, this is not quite what I need. I'm going to go make my own thing. And then a dude named Adam Jacob was doing a lot of consulting for web scale companies, and he was using Puppet, and Puppet wasn't scaling, wasn't doing what he wanted, so he went and he created Chef. Fun fact, the original name for Chef was Marionette, and
like a puppet.
Yeah, the reason Chef is called Chef is because it's very easy to type. It's short and easy to type. So then we had Ansible, SaltStack was in there for a little bit, but like Terraform was sort of the thing that brought everybody to the cloud, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, so these other tools like Puppet and Chef and everything were very much when we were thinking at the operating system level. Like, I'm going to configure my Apache server. I'm going to configure my Tomcat server or servers, as was the case. But when you were trying to go and say like, okay, but how do I do things to the cloud? Everybody sort of tried it a little bit. And then like Hashi came along with Terraform and we all kind of went, cool, let's do that. And then we get into nowadays with, you know, because with like Pulumi, because again, we're talking about actual coding and using a programming language instead of a DSL. And the thing is, when it comes to any of these things, the most important thing is use something. When I was at Chef, people would say, or when I was part of the Chef community and then worked at Chef, people would say, well, should I use Chef or Puppet? And my answer was always yes. And I've always said that like our biggest competitor in any of these spaces are never the other company. It's always Do Nothing Incorporated, right?
Yeah.
So I want to see people doing something. And if whatever is the right thing, I have, you know, I used to say that I worked at Chef because I believe in Chef. That's still true. Like I came to Pulumi, not just because they offered me a job, but like I believe in what we're trying to do with it. And I think it's really powerful. But like if Terraform's going to make you be awesome, go be awesome. Right. But like, just don't like click in the console. Like, you know, let's do something effective.
You know, it's like that meme, isn't it? Or that saying, friends don't let friends right click publish, that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of one of the things that I've always thought about with DevRel. One of the things that people have always said, you know, when I was at Twilio, if you wanted to use a competitor, if that's the right decision, go and do that, because you can't say to someone, yeah, okay, come and use Twilio. It's 20% more expensive, but we do good stuff or whatever. If they can't do that, but they need that functionality, then I was always of the think, yeah, go and do that. But this is how you might want to think about architecting your system or something. You know, there's always ways that I think you lose your authenticity if you don't believe in the thing that you do. And that doesn't mean just the company. It's the whole ethos behind it, isn't it? You want to come and say, I believe that you should structure your code well, not because it's easier to deploy to some cloud platform. It's just nicer to use, nicer to maintain. And you want people to be doing better deployments, better systems, to have continuous integration. And if they're using a tool, that's half the battle, because as you say, if they're already going to use Terraform, well, they might come over to Pulumi. That's easier to do that shift, isn't it? To show them, well, you're already doing this, here's the comparison. But if people are doing nothing, that's no good for anybody.
I used to say when I was a chef, and I'd have reps I would work with, and it was always about disrupting Puppet and everything. And I was like, there's plenty of market share for us to both steal from Blade Logic, right? It's like there's so much. And one of the things that I continually try to get, like, people who work in the DevOps space, especially in the advocacy and the space where we're talking about this, we definitely get into this bubble where we forget that all of this really forward-thinking work that we're trying to do is still such a small slice of IT around the world. And I used to get into this. I had someone I worked with who would be like, I would talk about ways that people do stuff, within enterprises, and be like, no, Matty, they don't do it anymore. I talk to enterprises all the time. And I was like, no, you talk to enterprises that are aware that they should even talk to you.
Yes.
But I think about friends I have that I don't know, that are not industry friends, but are working. I have friends who are business analysts at pharma companies, and it's so far removed from this kind of stuff. And which is fine, but I'm just saying, it's all over the place. And we have to remember that like we're all going and fighting for the same mind share of this actually very small thing, which thankfully every year that's getting bigger and bigger. And if we look, with one thing I think is really interesting, if you look at like the Accelerate state of the DORA reports and the state of DevOps report and all this, what's interesting is there's like sort of the like your elite performers, your high performers, your low and like your really low. And what is interesting that we sort of see is that the number of elites get bigger. Like the middle is shrinking. Like the lows don't move, but the people in the middle are getting better. But like people are not moving from the low to the middle. They're just sort of staying there. And it's the maybe the DevOps middle class is what's shrinking, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if I like that analogy the more I think about it, but maybe it is.
I think I always refer to what Scott Hanselman calls these developers that we're always trying to reach and help. And it's the dark matter developers. They're the ones that aren't watching streams, aren't on Twitter, aren't going to conferences. They're the ones that are out there. We know they're there, but we never have any connection with it. And it's people like in my second job who didn't know any better than dragging stuff over, or how much better everyone's life could be. And when I talk about that, I mean the developers, the customers, the sales executives, everybody in the company can be better if like their systems are better, that they're not having customers phone up and go, I'm sorry, I can't get my order through because the website's broken, or I can't see what you're talking about because someone has dragged and dropped and they've done a bug fix but they've regressed it and no one has any idea where that is and they've wound it back. That makes everybody's life harder. And it's not about, just having someone who wants to build something for their resume or their CV and go, we use some deployment system. It's about everything's more robust for everybody involved in this company, product, whatever it is. And I think that's what is really hard to get across to people because, you've got some, let's say, senior developer or mid-level developer or even a junior developer coming in and going, I really want to do this cool thing. I saw at a conference called Pulumi. And they'll come in and you've got some crusty old architect who goes, that's not the way we do it. We've never done it like that. Why should we change? Some form of that. Or you've got a CTO who's like, yeah, but why would I want to do that? It ain't broke. Or you have someone who isn't out there seeing the latest things and how it could all be so much better and cheaper because they're not having things go down on them. They're not having to take the website offline to do a deployment. I mean, I tweeted, I think it was sometime this year, I was trying to get on H&M.com And I tried to go on there, and they're like, "Oh, our website is down for updates." I'm like, "Sorry, what? Who takes their website? I want to go and buy clothes, and your website is down for updates. I'm going to go to ASOS now. Sorry, see ya." Because ASOS has a whole, I mean, they often talk at .NET conferences, Microsoft conferences, because they're a huge distributed system of microservices all built on .NET, and like their architecture and everything, they're very open about it. They don't need to take their store offline to run updates.
So, and this goes back in a lot of ways. Any of this goes back again to empathy. And this is something I've learned, especially when you're trying to do change. So in a lot of organizations, you'll have people that have been there for a long time. And I know when I was going in, again, this trying to convince people like, yes, move to infrastructure as code, move to this better way. There were people sitting in those meetings who are like, I've been working at this bank in ops for 30 years. You are the 15th person in my career to come in and tell me everything's going to be amazing. And the 14 before you, it all sucked. So, okay, fine. My boss, because we've all been through that, right? We've all been through okay, here's the thing, and this is why, when I talk about cultural transformation or organizational transformation, there's this idea between people being compliant and people being committed, right? And compliant, yes. This is also why mandates generally don't work. And we talk about how transformation has to come from below, but it also can't just come from the grassroots, because developers can't buy anything that costs more than $50, right? So and you need support from up top, because it's the frozen middle for transformation that always gets us. The other thing to remember is, and this is what I used to tell our sales reps when I was at PagerDuty, and they would bump up against, whoever was that ops manager that was like, this is how we do things and this is process. I'm like, here's the thing you got to remember. A lot of times these systems that you're trying to disrupt, the person that is there, they went through blood, sweat, and tears to build that. And especially some of these systems, this was stuff that was so hard, and it was years of their life. And you're coming in and saying your baby's ugly. Yeah. Right. You're coming in and saying this thing that was so important to you, and you like a tenth of your career, like 5 years of your life went into this. And I'm going to come in and be like, hey, dummy, you're doing it wrong. Come do some shiny DevOps. That's not going to work.
Up.
Yeah. Or, we used to run into this with it's sort of like when something is when it's not such a big change, but a little change. So we say this with Puppet, for example, right? It would come in, and I'm not talking, Puppet's cool too. This stuff is all better than what we used to do. So it's fine. But again, obviously I was working at Chef. We wanted people to buy Chef and, be like, well, what do you do when someone's really adamant? We're like, well, for a lot of folks who are doing things the really crappy way, and then it's this thing comes along and you try it and you're like, holy cow, I got this crazy dopamine hit because I did this thing. And now I'm going to come in and be like, no, that thing that made you feel good is wrong. And people that are in that scenario will argue with math.
Yeah.
Right. So it goes back to, I have a talk I've given many times. It's an older talk of mine. It's called The 5 Love Languages of DevOps. And that book is terrible. But the idea is you have to think about what makes sense to me is not going to make sense to someone else in my organization. And you have to think about how, again, maybe the automation part is really, I get that. I understand that. But someone else in my organization, they're going to be more jamming on the measurement part. But I don't see the value of that. So I'm going to go off about but look, if we wrote this infra code and we did this or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And this other person's like to your point, why do I care? This doesn't help. And we all need to get better at writing business cases if we want to make change. We need to understand how does this, because all of this stuff, like Layla said, it benefits the whole organization. But not only does everybody in the organization have to change a little bit about how they think about it, that was the thing that people messed up in Agile a lot, was understanding that if you were going to fully do Agile, it wasn't just about how your software got written. It was about how you bought things. It was about how you sold things. Your sales motions had to change. Yeah. All sorts of stuff had to change in your org, not just within tech. But they all benefit from it, but you have to figure out, how do you sell it to them? Because it makes sense to you to be like, yeah, I don't have to click publish anymore. I can do whatever. Why does my CFO care about that?
Yeah. This is it's one of the things when I do my TDD talk, People always go, but how do I sell this into my company? How do I make the change? And I think with a lot of the things that we do as developers or I don't, what do I say? People who specialize in DevOps? I don't know. You see, this is where I go back to, like, what do I call these people? Are they developers? Are you ops developers? This is it. I don't know, but it's a huge culture shift. Yes. Whatever we're doing is a massive culture shift. So, like, if I go developers and people who specialize in DevOps, what do I call those people where I'm not going to offend them?
I mean, they're just all engineers, right? Like,
engineers.
It's not someone's. There's not a particular job that's about how do I make change in my organization. Like, everybody can contribute to that. Everyone, if it matters to you, regardless what your title is. Because in fact, part of the problem is if there's someone who that's just their job is to define the way that we work, that's distanced from the people that chop wood, carry water. And we talk a lot about this idea. I'm going to misremember where it comes from. John Allspaw is the one who introduced me to it, but it's this dichotomy between work is imagined versus work is done, right? So you'll, in an organization, you'll go talk to your senior leadership or whatever, or to people, and we'll be like, hey, cool, tell me like what your SDLC is like how does this work? And they'll be like, oh, well, we do blah, 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 blah. Then you go talk to people that chop wood and carry water, and they're like, oh, you see, no, that's not what we do. And it's common. It's not anybody's fault, right? It's not like a lack of vision or anything. It's just at that level, it's different. So you kind of have to get everybody involved.
Yeah. And would that be? I keep hearing a lot now of SRE, site reliability engineers. That seems to be something that's really coming up now. It seems a bit of a buzzword. Do you think that's kind of like the engineering side of it, this kind of
part
thing?
Of it. One of the things I like, so SRE is interesting. SRE is another one that's having the same problem DevOps had, which was like, we just want to rebrand. Like, I used to joke, I used to say, like, it's crazy. There's no more sysadmins in Chicago anymore. They're all DevOps engineers. But if I look at the job title, it's about changing backup tapes. And that was years ago, right? And the same thing, we don't have, now they're all SREs, but they're not doing SRE necessarily. And to further complicate things, there's almost two kinds of SRE. There's like what I call GSRE, and then there's SRE. So GSRE is Google SRE, because SRE came out of Google. It was a practice at Google. And Google just does things different than other people because, to be honest, you probably don't have to do things the way Google does. There's like 3 companies in the world that might have to do SRE the way Google does. You don't, but there's things we can learn. And so it's like looking at things like the SRE book and saying, what can I apply? But one of the things I see that happens in a lot of orgs is they will pick and choose. And that's dangerous, right? Because you're like, okay, well, we're going to do this part, but we're not going to do this part. And they all connect. But one of the best ways I've seen SRE described, and it was Liz Fong Jones and Seth Vargo both kind of came up with this, is they would say class SRE implements DevOps, right? So like SRE is an implementation of, if DevOps is an idea, SRE is one implementation, or it's part of an implementation of DevOps. But it's also very easy to continually fall back into like, we keep doing things the way we do. And there's a lot of things about SRE practice that organizations don't want to do. One of the principles in SRE is that your SREs can stop a deployment, right? Like, just because you want to deploy, SREs have the andon cord, if that's the right one to say for this, they can just sit there and say like, no, we're not pushing this. And I don't care if the CTO says go. We absolutely can stop this deployment. And that's the thing that always bumps up. That then you start to bring that up when you want to do this in your org, and they're like, ooh, yeah, but not like that. That we don't like that, right? And then, but that's a key idea to be able to do. If you want to do error budgets, you have to be able to do that kind of a thing. So they're all connected. And hopefully, that AWS
we're still going.
Is doing great. Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. And I think the thing that I take away from a lot of these conversations is that I'm a developer. But that doesn't mean that I can or should wash my hands of how my code gets out in the wild. And I think that doesn't mean that I necessarily am the one to push that button, but I personally want to have more awareness of how things go, just so I can be a better developer, how I can think about how might I code something or write something so that it's easier to deploy, it's more robust, that it makes the person who does press that button's life easier. And I think that's what we want to go. So what have we got there? We've got, so far, all of these buzzwords are describing a goal. It sounds like a lot of people try and define it as you have to do X, Y, Z. Many roads lead to Rome. And that's a really valid point, blocking out HD. And I see, Matt, you've said a hard agree. Yeah. I think there is too much dogmatism around and not enough pragmatism.
That's true. And also people want... Like, we tried very hard in the early days of the DevOps movement to not be prescriptive, to focus, to talk about the outcomes. And the interesting thing is, in the lack of prescription, it will get filled in by a vendor. It will get filled in by something else. So that was actually one of the hard things about DevOps early on, was because that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
Because we weren't prescriptive, somebody came in and was prescriptive, right? And it kind of became something else. This goes back to, like, when I think about the idea of cloud engineering, like, to me, a lot of it is thinking about what are the things that from an operational standpoint we can learn and glean from awesome software engineering practices. How can we be thinking about how this is operating and running at scale when we're designing it, when we're coding it, and how does security and compliance layer into all of this, right? Which is really a lot of what DevOps was supposed to be in the beginning. And it's funny because one of the seminal sort of defining DevOps things was this talk at Velocity in 2009. Paul Hammond and John Allspaw, who were at Flickr at the time, the talk was called 10 deploys a day, which is funny. Like, everyone's like, oh my God, 10 deploys a day, holy shit, right? It was called 10 deploys a day, dev plus ops cooperation at Flickr. And the talk was all about how they were able to do this. And it was really the biggest word in that whole title was cooperation. It was all about, how they were building those bridges, doing all this stuff. And what so many people got out of that was, cool, but how did you push the button? Like, how does the button work? And it's like, no, the button isn't what matters. It's the people. So that's sort of the thing where it's like, we keep going back and we want to be like, well, tell me how to do it. And that's how we end up with this, like, okay, well, what does Netflix do? I'll just do that. Well, no, you're not Netflix. You're a bank. Your implementation is going to be different. Your outcomes, your desired outcomes are actually the same. You want the same thing, but like Blocking HT said, that many roads lead to that outcome. You got to find the one that's right for you, but focus on that outcome that you're trying to achieve, not the implementation detail. That's going to vary, right? Yeah. Like, and there's good practices. There's lots of great practices you can adopt, but you need to start with what's the outcome you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah. And I think Blocking HT has another one here, like saying, I work with developers who have no idea what happens after their PR gets committed, and that causes major issues. I think that's exactly what I was trying to say, is that developers don't need to know like the minutiae of how stuff happens, but just need to have a broader idea of like what happens, where is it going, what is all going on with that. So I definitely think it helps everyone if everyone is a little bit more clued in. And likewise, the people who do press the buttons might, if they're not developers, they're still engineers, but maybe they need to know a little bit more about how code gets going, it gets pushed through, and the difficulties that developers are going, and why maybe they can't hit that deadline or can't do it in a certain way. I think that's everyone, it all comes down, as you keep saying, empathy, people having understanding of the roadblocks that others have, those pain points that everyone is experiencing, so that we can all help move forward in a better way. And that brings us on to a nice positive thing. Happy birthday again! Yay! I think that calls for more cake.
More
cake.
Always more cake.
Always more cake. Like, see, more people are now, like, we've got more Aztec Consulting's coming in, more cake. And I think that's something that we can all take away, is just greater empathy. It's one of the things I always try to I can be too empathetic, which can be difficult sometimes. You end up being a doormat. But I think if you consider the pain points of others, I think that can always leave you in good stead. So we're coming to the end of our chit chat, Matty. What do you think is a key thing that most people should understand about DevOps and the practice there, or some good starting points for those developers who don't understand it, like the ones that Blocking HD is saying, those developers who have no idea what happens after their PR gets committed. Where's a good starting point? Where should people start with the whole thing?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually was finding some links I wanted to be ready for, and I have a blog post I wrote back in November of 2014. So it is not comprehensive, but I'm going to toss it in the chat anyway.
Yeah, do so.
And it's the reason that I created this blog post was it even says the blog post said once a week I get a message like this one. I need to learn about this DevOps thing. Where do I start? So some of these resources I still apply. It's still there. Really this blog post was this basically a copy paste of an email that I sent constantly at that time. But a lot of that's going to be kind of older, but the ideas still exist. And also it depends so much on how you like to consume information. So like some people love books, right? Yeah. So I could name several books, and I always kind of laugh because people say, what's the most important DevOps book to read? And I say, go read the book Freakonomics. Go learn about incentives, and then you'll understand DevOps, right? And how to change DevOps. But if you like books, there's some that are just some very mainstays that are great. So actually Devops for Dummies by Emily Freeman is a fantastic book, and absolutely a great starting point. Just to, if you're coming from none of it, but it gets pretty deep too. Don't let the title fool you, right? The book Accelerate by Dr. Forsgren and Gene Kim and others, and Jess Humble, is a lot around the data. That was one of the most amazing things that Dr. Forsgren did for us in the DevOps movement was put all the supporting data, because we kind of knew at the beginning, we're like, we feel like this is right, and Dr. Forsgren came along and was like, here's the data. Also, by the way, when you're trying to convince people to change, here's your math. There is, if you like podcasts, I'll shill a little bit. So I have a long-running DevOps podcast called Arrested DevOps, which I've got a bunch of episodes I need to publish. I apologize, but we've been around since, it's about 8 years now. Again, it feels funny to me to be like, we're this long running show, and I still feel like we're the babies, but we've been around for a while. We have a lot of great guests, a lot of ideas. If you, and then I would also like find your local Devops days, or a lot of them are virtual now too. And it's what's interesting to me. I'll just put it this way, because a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, DevOps days, that's just like for ops people. Like, no matter who you are, you think DevOps days doesn't have enough content for you. So you're fine. So don't worry about it. It's good. And that's actually one of the powerful things. I think going to a conference that is not your thing. Like, so if you are more of a developer-oriented person, or you're more of a SWE or whatever, like, go check out like some SRECon talks, right? Like, go watch some talks from an ops focused thing. And likewise, if you're an ops person, like, look at like what people are talking about in the language conferences. And one of the most, if you can do this in your organization, this is something that is hard to move as an individual contributor. But I've seen be so effective is when people have the ability to do rotations through other teams. So, someone who's normally spends their time as a developer maybe can spend a few weeks with the SRE team, with the ops team, with the kind of seeing what they do, shadowing, and then vice versa. But those are a couple of places to start. And there's a bunch of lovely people on Twitter. You can follow me. It's not always the most educational of content, but it exists so far as that. And if anybody has any DevOpsy type questions and stuff, I don't have all the answers, but turns out I know a lot of people, and they usually have answers. So you can find me on Twitter. Would love to keep this conversation
I'm
going
just
with
dropping your Twitter thing in there. I will say I went to my first sort of DevOps focused conference, which was Devops Loop,
Yes.
where I met you, and I spoke at that, and I watched quite a lot there. And as a developer, I was like, oh, this is far more interesting than I thought it was going to be. So, that is... I definitely recommend it, folks. Go and try it. Wesley spoke there too. Yay! So, I think go and try it. I mean, I know at loads of the language conferences I go to, there's always something on Kubernetes. And I know that we've had talks at my meetup about my ex-co-organizer. He's my ex-co-organizer because he buggered off to New Zealand, and he's given us lots of talks on Kubernetes, and he's given talks on Pulumi. He's very into that side of it, even though we're all .NET developers. I think there's a lot of interest in it. So that's fantastic. So videos from cloud engineering.
So we had an event that Pulumi kind of put on, but it wasn't about Pulumi per se, called the Cloud Engineering Summit. That was back in October, and that link I just dropped in there is all of the videos. And there's a ton of content that it's not quote DevOps, but to me, it's all about almost every talk at that summit is about DevOps, just not using those words.
Yeah.
So, yes, Wesley did speak there too. Wesley is everywhere, which is good. By the way, I'm also just going to do a little shout out. I know we're talking about, sort of from the .NET side, but we did talk a little DevReli a little bit at the beginning. So if you also are a podcasty person, there's a fantastic podcast called Community Pulse that Wesley, who's in the chat, is one of the hosts. It's one of my favorite shows about what community means. They touch on DevRel things sometimes and everything. So, go
drop
find
a link, Wesley.
Wesley, drop in the link for Community Pulse.
Go for it. Drop in a link. Yeah. That's awesome. And if you want to carry on any conversation with this, folks, you can come into the Discord for my channel. We haven't got a Tanzu Discord. I don't know if people would like a Tanzu Discord. Is that something people are interested in? But if you want to carry on conversations and things like that, my Layla Codes at Discord is a good place where we have lots of chat about all sorts of things, and we're very happy. It's not just .NET, not all of that. Thank you, Wesley, for dropping that in. I can't seem to put that on my featured chat. I don't know if it's filtering out links, but it's in there. And Adiri says the fireside chat with Kelsey and Joe is legendary already. So that
was from the Cloud Engineering Summit. Yeah. So our opening keynote was Emily Freeman, and then also a fireside chat with Kelsey Hightower and Joe Duffy, who's the founder of Pulumi. And it was, again, if you know Kelsey, it will not surprise you in the least that it was thought-provoking and just really fascinating. I'm so proud. I'm just sorry. I have to pat myself a little bit on the back for that event a little bit, because I always, when I organize a bunch of conferences, and I always want to put on a conference that I would be like, I don't want to miss that. And I feel like we accomplished that. And
fantastic.
I'm hoping we're going to accomplish that in May for Devops Days Chicago.
Well, I think you will. I know how much effort goes into organizing conferences, and you deserve cake. And I think you deserve a pat on the back, and it's okay to pat yourself on the back. Sometimes these things, they take a lot of effort to do them. And speaking of Kelsey, I am going to do his Kubernetes the hard way next week with Whitney on Wednesday, and possibly overflowing onto Thursday, because I'm not very good at this stuff. I'm probably going to be swearing a lot, so be prepared. The expletives do slip out occasionally, so that's next Wednesday. So you can come and laugh at me trying to figure that out. I've never done anything with Kubernetes. Is that at the same time as the show? I will not.
I really want to tune into it, so I'm looking at my calendar.
All right, it's going to be. What time did I have to check the calendar? So
okay, well,
Whitney, I've got it right here. Just give me a moment. Whitney on my team. Where is the calendar?
By the way, Whitney is like top-notch karaoke. Just in case anybody wanted to know, she brings her '90s karaoke jam.
Okay.
So
unlike me, folks, you know, like ears bleed when I sing, so I avoid things like that in general. Okay, so we are going to be on my channel, so let me give myself a shout out. Here we go. So if you want to tune in to that, we are going to kick off about this time. Yeah, it's going to be noon your time, Matty. So are you busy? Noon.
I am. I'm
the
streaming.
15th.
I'll be streaming with Microsoft Reactor with Jay Gordon talking about Azure container apps at that same time. So
well, we're going to be going for 3 hours. So
yeah, I will drop in after. So save some of your expletives.
I will. So that's going to be that's 4 p.m. GMT, 12 Central, 1 Eastern, early o'clock for that lot over on the West Coast, and quite late for our friends further east. But that should be entertaining, and I think we're going to do that the next day as well. So on the Thursday at about maybe a little bit earlier. About 11 your time, because Whitney's in the same time slice as you, so I have to get her up out of bed and onto streams with me. But I just want to say a huge thank you, Matty, for coming in and sharing both your birthday, because that's huge. I feel very privileged that you came on your birthday to join us, and just your knowledge, because you are very knowledgeable in this. You've been around for, I don't want to say been around for a long time, you know, no one wants to hear that on their birthday, but you've been in this spot for, you know, a large percentage of its lifetime, and sharing your knowledge. I've really appreciated it, and I'm sure everyone in chat has, and we've come up with a new swear word, YAML. YAML this.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And folks, remember, you can get more Matty and me on Thursday. And probably I will try and keep the potty mouth under control as well when you're trying to get me to do infrastructure as code. I won't be very...
we don't seem to have any rules, so
oh, that's
at least
all
they
right.
haven't told me any yet. So let's find out. Let's find out.
Oh yeah, when I drop those F-bombs, because I'm like, ah! So, all right, folks, thank you so much. And Blocking HD says, really informative.
Thank you for everybody for all the birthday wishes. I really appreciate it.
Yay! What are you going to do now for your birthday? Anything more today?
So I think I'm going to catch up on all the Slack messages from my team that I missed, because they all just had their team meeting in the last half an hour that I skipped out on, so that's great. So I'll find out all the work I got signed up for, and a little bit later, after this evening, my kids and I are all going out to dinner, and that's pretty much it. You know, it's just gonna be chill. It's just 47. Yay. It's not a landmark birthday. It just happens. I already got my best birthday present, which was like this ridiculous video from Corey Quinn. If you didn't see it yet.
That was great. It was some video.
So
go and check it out.
That made my day.
I bet.
That'll be it. So thanks
so much. Well, thank you so much. Happy birthday. I won't sing and make your ears bleed. And you can check out Code It Live next, folks, where I am going to go and butcher some more C#. Yay. And we're going to go raid over there in a moment as soon as Alyssa goes live. So thanks, Matty. And we'll catch you all later. I'll be on the Layla Codes It channel on Thursday. Later on today, we have Tanzu Tuesdays. Oh my god, I don't know who's on today. I think that's in about 2 hours, so come back on this channel for Tanzu Tuesdays with Lee, Whitney and Tiffany and guest. And with that, thank you so much. We're going to raid over to Code It Live imminently as soon as they're live, so just hang on out, and catch you all later. Thanks, Matty.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much.
this README, it's just a one-time setup, because once you set it up correctly, then your pipelines are all set. And after that, you can just go ahead and run. An important step here is to make sure run it sequentially. So make sure you run the podcast API CD first, and then go ahead and run the podcast hub, which is a SignalR hub, and then there is the web that you need to deploy, because the podcast API is the one which has the scripts for just deploying to SQL Server and ACR setup and things like that. So you need to set up that first, and if you run each of it one by one, it'll all be set up for you automatically, and then all that you need is whatever the web app name you gave, it will configure correctly, and then it'll give you this endpoint that you can work with.
Okay, awesome. So we just were rated by Layla, and which is awesome, but we are actually we're wrapping up our thing here. So we've been looking at the .NET Podcast app, which was from .NET Conf, and I've got the link for the GitHub repo, and we've walked through the deployment stuff. And then kind of as we're closing, Nish, where other than kind of digging through the repo and looking at the docs there, is there anything else you'd like to recommend for people getting started with this?
No, I think we would like to